The registration hall of the Crucible stretched like a cathedral of metal and light. Hundreds of species from across the galaxy filled the space, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, growls, and melodic tones. Warriors from every corner of known space came here with the same dream: to prove themselves in the most dangerous testing facility ever created. Dae-Sung stood in line, his human frame looking small compared to the massive creatures around him. A Draknir warrior stood 3 meters tall, covered in scales that could deflect plasma fire. A Velkari administrator worked the registration desk, her 4 arms moving with practiced efficiency. Nobody paid attention to the human in worn combat gear, carrying nothing but a small pack. When Dae-Sung reached the desk, the Velkari administrator named Hana barely glanced at him. Her golden eyes scanned his identification chip, and she paused. Her fingers stopped moving across the holographic display. "Human," she said, her voice carrying surprise. "You're registering for the Crucible?" "Yes," Dae-Sung replied simply. Hana's eyes moved across her screen, reading something that made her expression shift. "You understand that humans have never passed level 5? Your species lacks the physical strength of most warriors here. Your technology is primitive compared to the Coalition standard. I understand," Dae-Sung interrupted. "I'm still registering." Around them, other warriors had started to notice. A group of insectoid Kresh warriors clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The massive Draknir warrior Dae-Sung had noticed earlier turned to look, his amber eyes filled with something like pity. Hana leaned forward slightly. "The entry fee is everything you own. Your ship, your weapons, your credits. If you fail, you leave with nothing. Are you certain?" Dae-Sung placed his hand on the scanner. "I'm certain." The transaction completed with a soft chime. Hana studied him for a long moment, then handed him a small device. "This will guide you to the preparation chambers. Your first level begins in 6 hours. Use that time to rest. You'll need it." As Dae-Sung walked away, he heard the whispers start behind him. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They'd been discovered only 15 years ago, and their reputation was mixed. Brave, certainly. Creative in unexpected ways. But physically weak, short-lived, and prone to emotional decisions that baffled more logical species. The preparation chamber was simple: a bed, a food dispenser, and a screen showing information about the Crucible. Dae-Sung sat on the bed and pulled out a small photograph from his jacket. The image showed 2 men, both human, both smiling. Brothers. The man on the left was Dae-Sung, 5 years younger. The man on the right would never age another day. "I'm here, Tae-hyun," Dae-Sung whispered to the photograph. "I'm going to finish what you started." 3 years ago, his brother had attempted the Crucible. Tae-hyun had been everything the galaxy expected from a warrior. Strong, fast, skilled with every weapon. He'd reached level 6, further than any human before him. Then, the level had killed him. The Coalition had sent Dae-Sung a message expressing regret and returning his brother's belongings. Nothing more. The device on Dae-Sung's wrist beeped. Time to begin. The first level chamber opened before him like a mouth. Inside, holographic projections created a landscape of jagged rocks and deep crevasses. Automated weapons tracked movement from hidden positions. The goal was simple: reach the other side without dying. Dae-Sung studied the chamber for 30 seconds, then did something that confused every observer watching from the control room. He picked up a rock and threw it high into the air. Weapons immediately tracked the movement and fired, revealing their positions. While the systems were busy shooting the falling rock, Dae-Sung sprinted along a path they'd already cleared with their fire. He crossed level 1 in 4 minutes. The previous record was 7. Hana watched from the observation deck, her forearms crossed. "Interesting," she murmured. Level 2 tested reaction speed. Projectiles fired from random directions, and warriors had to dodge or block them. Most species used their natural armor or enhanced reflexes. Dae-Sung used the walls, bouncing between surfaces in ways the automated systems hadn't been programmed to expect. He took 3 hits but reached the exit in record time. Level 3 required solving a complex puzzle, while automated combat drones attacked. The puzzle had thousands of possible combinations. Most warriors used advanced computational abilities, or simply tried every combination until something worked. Daesung looked at the puzzle for 10 seconds, then ignored it completely. Instead, he disabled each combat drone carefully, reprogrammed one using its own interface, and had it solve the puzzle while he defended it. The technique was crude and shouldn't have worked, but the Crucible's systems hadn't anticipated someone turning the test against itself. By the time Daesung finished level 3, the observation deck had filled with curious onlookers. Word was spreading through the facility. A human was doing something unexpected. Tovan, the legendary Draknir warrior who held the record for deepest Crucible run, stood at the observation window. His scaled face showed no emotion, but his tail moved in slow, thoughtful patterns. "He's not stronger than previous humans," Tovan said to Hana. "He's not faster." "What's different?" "He doesn't play by the rules," Hana replied. "Or rather, he finds rules we didn't know we'd written." Level 4 changed everything. The chamber generated a maze that adapted to counter whatever strategy the warrior used. If you used strength, the walls became stronger. If you used speed, the paths became longer. If you used intelligence, the maze became more complex. It learned and evolved in real time. Daesung entered the maze and immediately sat down. In the observation deck, confusion rippled through the crowd. Warriors didn't just sit down. The maze began shifting around him, walls moving to trap him in increasingly smaller spaces. Still, Daesung sat motionless, his eyes closed. 5 minutes passed. 10. The maze had boxed him into a space barely large enough for his body. Then Daesung opened his eyes and smiled. He'd been listening. The maze made sounds when it moved, mechanical whispers as panels shifted. He'd spent 10 minutes learning the pattern, understanding the rhythm of how it adapted. He stood and began moving, but not toward the exit. He moved in patterns that made no sense, triggering the maze to respond in specific ways. He was playing with it, teaching it to expect certain behaviors. Then suddenly, he broke the pattern completely and sprinted in a direction the maze hadn't predicted. The maze tried to compensate, but Daesung had given it false data. It had learned the wrong lessons. By the time the systems caught up to his real strategy, he'd already found the exit. Level 4 complete. The facility's betting markets exploded with activity. A human had just passed level 4. It seemed impossible. Hana accessed Daesung's biographical file, reading deeper. The entry was sparse. Former military, discharged after psychological evaluation. No details on what that evaluation contained. Multiple citations for creative problem-solving in combat situations. A note that said, "Does not respond predictably to standard tactical scenarios." Level 5 was where humans always failed. The chamber created an environment of complete sensory deprivation, then slowly introduced pain, fear, and disorientation. Warriors had to maintain consciousness and navigate to an exit they couldn't see, hear, or sense through normal means. Most species had specific advantages here. Telepaths could sense the room's dimensions. Those with echolocation could map the space. Those with redundant sensory organs could compensate for what was taken away. Humans had none of these advantages. Daesung entered level 5, and the darkness swallowed him whole. The observers couldn't see inside. The chamber blocked all external monitoring. They could only wait. 1 hour passed. 2. At 3 hours, the system indicated his life signs were failing. At 3 hours and 40 minutes, the exit door opened. Daesung stumbled out, bleeding from his nose and ears. His hands were torn and bruised. He collapsed immediately, and medical drones rushed to stabilize him. In the medical bay, Hana stood over his unconscious form. The medical report showed he'd damaged his hands intentionally, using pain to keep himself conscious. He'd navigated by touch alone, feeling every centimeter of the walls, creating a mental map through sheer stubborn determination. When Daesung woke 6 hours later, Hana was still there. "You can stop now," she said quietly. You've proven yourself beyond any human before you. The Coalition will grant you honorable status. You'll have respect, contracts, everything you came for. Daesung sat up slowly, wincing at the pain. When can I continue? You nearly died in there. But I didn't. When can I continue? Hana's forearms gestured in frustration. Why? What are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, Daesung said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. I'm trying to finish something. Before Hana could respond, the medical bay door opened. Tovan entered, his massive frame filling the doorway. The Draknir warrior approached Daesung's bed and studied him with ancient eyes. Level 6 broke. The strongest warrior my species ever produced, Tovan said. She was twice your size, 3 times your strength, and had survived battles that would fill your history books. Level 6 killed her. It will kill you too. Maybe, Daesung said, but I need to try. Tovan's tail moved in what might have been respect. I understand. I reached level 9 before it nearly destroyed my mind. I came to warn you, human. Level 6 is not about strength or intelligence. It's about facing what you fear most. The Crucible will find your weakness and exploit it without mercy. I know, Daesung said simply. After Tovan left, Daesung pulled out the photograph of his brother again. His hands shook slightly as he looked at it. Level 6, he whispered. That's where you died, Taehyun. Let's see what killed you. Daesung spent 3 days recovering. The medical technology of the Coalition was advanced beyond anything Earth possessed, but even alien medicine couldn't rush the body's natural healing. He used the time to study everything he could find about Level 6. The information was limited. The Crucible kept its secrets well. What he learned was simple and terrifying. Level 6 used psychological warfare. It created simulations of the galaxy's deadliest predators, creatures that had hunted sentient species to extinction before the Coalition had finally destroyed them. These weren't just dangerous animals. They were nightmares given form. On the morning of the 4th day, Daesung received a message on his communication device. The message was from Earth, from a woman named Jiwon. She was an engineer, someone who had worked with his brother years ago. After Taehyun's death, she'd reached out to Daesung, offering support he'd never asked for but had grown to appreciate. The whole planet is watching, her message said. The transmission had taken 3 days to reach the Crucible from Earth. You've already done more than anyone expected. Come home safe, Daesung. That's all that matters. He saved the message but didn't respond. There was nothing to say that she'd receive in time to matter. The doors to Level 6 opened with a hiss of pressurized air. The chamber beyond was enormous, easily a kilometer across. The environment simulated a jungle from a planet the Coalition had long ago marked as too dangerous for settlement. Thick vegetation created shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air felt wet and heavy. In the observation deck, the crowd had grown larger. News of the humans' progress had spread throughout the facility. Warriors who had failed earlier levels came to watch. Administrators who'd worked at the Crucible for decades wanted to see if this human would break like all the others. Hana stood at the front, her 4 arms gripping the railing. Beside her, Tovan watched in silence. Daesung took 3 steps into the jungle and stopped. The silence was absolute except for his breathing. Somewhere in this environment, multiple predators waited. The simulation would make them behave exactly as they had in life. Intelligent, patient, lethal. Then Daesung did something that made every observer lean forward in confusion. He sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. What is he doing? A Kresh warrior chittered. The predators will find him immediately, but they didn't. Minutes passed. The jungle remained still. Daesung was listening, but more than that, he was thinking. Every warrior who'd attempted this level had done the same thing. They'd tried to hunt the predators. They'd used their strength, their speed, their weapons, their instincts. They'd treated it like a combat scenario. But Daesung had read something in the limited files he'd found. These predators had hunted sentient species. They'd evolved to kill beings that used tools and tactics. They'd learned to counter intelligence itself. Fighting them directly was playing their game. So Daesung decided not to play. He opened his eyes and began moving through the jungle, but not quietly. He made noise, broke branches, left obvious tracks. He wanted the predators to find him. Around him, he could sense movement now, shadows that were too deliberate to be natural. The predators were converging. In the observation deck, someone whispered, "He's committed suicide." But Dae-sung wasn't running toward death. He was running toward something he'd noticed when he'd first entered, a region where the vegetation grew differently, where the ground composition changed. He'd spent those quiet minutes memorizing the terrain layout shown briefly on the entry display. The first predator burst from the undergrowth behind him. It looked like a nightmare combination of a large cat and an insect, 8 legs carrying a sleek body built for killing. Its mandibles could crush steel. Its multiple eyes tracked movement with perfect precision. Dae-sung didn't fight it. He ran straight toward the terrain boundary he'd identified, the creature gaining with every step. Just as it leaped for the killing strike, Dae-sung dropped and rolled. The predator sailed over him and landed in the different terrain zone. Immediately, a second predator emerged. This one was territorial. The two creatures had been programmed with their natural behaviors, and those behaviors included fierce territorial instincts. The second predator saw the first as an invader. The two nightmares collided in a fury of claws and teeth. While they fought, Dae-sung moved deeper into the jungle. He found another predator and repeated the process, using environmental boundaries to trigger territorial responses. He turned their own instincts against them. It took 2 hours, but Dae-sung never threw a punch or fired a weapon. He simply made the predators destroy each other while he navigated carefully through their territories. When he emerged from level 6, the observation deck erupted in chaos. Arguments broke out among the observers. Some claimed he'd cheated. Others argued that using the environment was legitimate strategy. Hana silenced them all with a sharp whistle from her translator device. "He passed," she said firmly. "The rules state only that a warrior must survive and reach the exit. Nothing more." Tovan's tail moved in slow, deliberate patterns. Respect, Dae-sung had learned among the Draknir species. But there was no time for celebration. Dae-sung had already requested immediate entry to Level 7. Level 7 was infamous for its simplicity. Survive for 72 hours in a hostile environment. No enemies to fight, no puzzles to solve. Just raw survival against heat, cold, thirst, hunger, and exhaustion. The environment cycled through every deadly condition known to the galaxy. Most warriors relied on their species' natural advantages. Beings from desert worlds could handle the heat. Those from frozen planets managed the cold. Species with efficient metabolisms needed less food and water. Humans had no such advantages. Earth was a moderate planet. Humans were generalists, adapted to nothing specific, masters of nothing particular. That generalist nature, Dae-sung knew, was exactly what he needed. The environment started hot. Scorching heat that would kill an unprotected human in hours. Dae-sung immediately began looking for water sources. He found none, but he found plants. Using techniques he'd learned from survival training, he extracted moisture from vegetation. It wasn't much, but it was enough. When the environment shifted to freezing cold, he used the same plants to create insulation. He dug into the ground, using body heat and primitive techniques to stay warm. In the observation deck, Hana had pulled up human files, reading about Earth's survival training methods. What she found surprised her. Humans taught their warriors to survive in any condition using minimal resources. They called it primitive survival skills, but there was nothing primitive about the knowledge itself. It was sophisticated understanding of how to extract resources from seemingly barren environments. The hours dragged on. Dae-sung cycled through environments that should have killed him. Toxic atmosphere, radiation exposure, zero gravity, high gravity. Each one tried to exploit human weaknesses, but humans were stubborn. They'd evolved on a planet that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Their bodies knew how to suffer and keep going. At the 50-hour mark, Dae-sung was exhausted, dehydrated, and injured from a fall during the high-gravity phase. But he was alive. He'd created tools from environmental debris, found food in places the simulation hadn't expected anyone to look, and adapted his shelter 17 times to match changing conditions. Jiwan's message had mentioned that Earth was watching. Through a communication network Dae-sung didn't fully understand, his attempt at the Crucible had become news back home. Humans throughout the solar system were following his progress. At hour 68, the environment became a sandstorm with zero visibility, and winds strong enough to strip flesh from bone. Daesung had 4 hours to survive this final challenge. He dug. Using a piece of metal he'd salvaged earlier, he excavated a hole deep enough to escape the worst of the wind. He covered the entrance with debris, creating a seal that kept most of the sand out. Then he waited in darkness, conserving energy, counting seconds to keep his mind active. When the 72 hours ended, the chamber doors opened. Daesung crawled out of his shelter, barely able to stand. Medical drones surrounded him immediately. Level 7 complete, the automated system announced. The observation deck had gone quiet. A human had just passed level 7. No one had expected this. Even Hana, who'd begun to believe Daesung might be special, looked shocked. But the real shock came when Daesung, still being supported by medical drones, looked up at the observation window and spoke clearly into the communication device he still wore. "I'm ready for level 8. "You can't be serious," Hana's voice came through the speaker. "You need to recover. Level 8 is a strategic simulation. You'll be commanding troops against overwhelming odds. You need to be at full mental capacity." "I understand the risks," Daesung replied. "But I'm not stopping." Tovan descended from the observation deck to the medical bay where they'd taken Daesung. The massive Draknir warrior stood over the human's recovery bed. "Level 8 broke the strongest warrior my species ever produced," Tovan said, echoing his earlier warning. She could calculate 1,000 tactical scenarios in seconds. She commanded armies across a dozen worlds. Level 8 showed her a battle she couldn't win, and it destroyed her confidence so completely that she never fought again. "What's the scenario?" Daesung asked. Tovan's eyes glowed amber in the medical bay's dim light. "You command a small force against an enemy that outnumbers you 10 to 1. The enemy has superior technology, better positions, and perfect intelligence about your capabilities. Every tactical advantage belongs to them. You cannot win through conventional strategy." "Then I won't use conventional strategy," Daesung said. After 3 days of recovery, Daesung entered level 8. The chamber transformed into a command center. Holographic displays showed a battlefield. Troops marked in blue for his forces, red for the enemy. The numbers were as Tovan had described. Overwhelming odds. Most warriors approached this level the same way. They tried to find the tactical solution, the clever move that would somehow turn defeat into victory. They commanded their forces with authority, using dominance and superiority to inspire obedience. Daesung took a different approach. He looked at his forces. Virtual soldiers from a dozen different species, each with unique abilities. He didn't command them. He talked to them. "I can't promise we'll win," he said to the simulation, "but I can promise that every one of you will be used in the way that best serves your abilities. I won't waste your lives on glory. I'll use them for survival." The simulation wasn't programmed for this kind of leadership. It tried to present tactical scenarios, but Daesung kept focusing on his individual units, learning their strengths, positioning them in ways that maximized their unique advantages. When the battle began, Daesung didn't try to win. He tried to make the enemy pay for every meter of ground. He used guerrilla tactics, unconventional positioning, and strategies that sacrificed territory for time. The simulation expected a warrior trying to achieve victory. Instead, it got a commander trying to survive with honor. 10 hours into the simulation, something unprecedented happened. The virtual soldiers began showing initiative, responding to Daesung's leadership style with creativity of their own. The simulation's AI, designed to be advanced, had adapted to his approach and was now generating emergent behavior. Daesung didn't win the battle in conventional terms, but he created a stalemate that the simulation couldn't resolve. He'd found a scenario where survival itself was victory. Level 8 complete. The galaxy was paying attention now. Daesung stood in the medical bay for the 4th time, his body healing from the exhaustion of level 8. The chamber had privacy screens, but he could sense the attention beyond them. The Crucible facility had become crowded with observers from across the galaxy. News feeds carried his progress to 100 worlds. A human had reached level 8. Only 4 other beings in recorded history had achieved this. The Coalition High Command had sent a formal message offering him an immediate commission as an elite warrior. He could walk away now with honor, wealth, and respect, everything a warrior could want. He deleted the message without responding. Hana visited him on the 2nd day of recovery. Her forearms carried data tablets and her golden eyes looked tired. She'd been researching constantly since Dae-sung had passed level 6. "I need to tell you something about level 9, she said without greeting. "Something that's not in the official records." Dae-sung sat up in his recovery bed. "I'm listening." "Level 9 is different from the others. It's not about physical survival or tactical thinking. It's a neural interface that connects directly to your brain. The simulation attacks your mind, forcing you to confront your greatest fears and deepest regrets. Most species have psychological defenses against this kind of attack: telepathic blocks, emotional compartmentalization, logical frameworks that separate trauma from consciousness. And humans?" Hana's expression was difficult to read. "Your species is psychologically vulnerable in ways the Crucible was designed to exploit. You don't compartmentalize trauma the way other species do. You carry it with you, integrated into your consciousness. The neural interface will find every painful memory, every moment of failure, every loss you've experienced, and it will make you live through them repeatedly." "How long does it last?" "There's no set time. It continues until you either break or overcome it. The record is held by a Velkari philosopher who endured for 8 hours before emerging victorious. Most warriors break within 2 hours. And Tovan?" Hana was quiet for a moment. "Tovan lasted 6 hours. He saw his entire species destroyed in front of him. Billions of deaths played out in perfect detail. He told me afterward that the simulation made him believe it was real, made him feel responsible for every single death. When he emerged, he wasn't the same warrior who'd entered. He never attempted level 10 even though physically he'd recovered." Dae-sung nodded slowly. "When can I begin?" "Did you not hear what I just said? This level is specifically designed to break beings like you. Humans who feel deeply, who remember pain, who can't simply logic away their trauma. You'll see your brother die, Dae-sung. You'll see it from every angle, in every horrible detail. And you won't be able to escape it until the simulation decides you've broken." "I understand," Dae-sung said, "but I'm not stopping." Before Hana could respond, Tovan entered the medical bay. The massive Draknir warrior had come to visit Dae-sung several times during his recovery periods, and an unlikely friendship had formed between them. "She's telling you the truth," Tovan said, his deep voice resonating in the small space. "Level 9 doesn't test your body. It tests your soul. When I was inside, the simulation showed me my home world burning. I watched my children die, my mate, every member of my clan. The simulation made me believe that I'd failed them, that their deaths were my fault because I hadn't been strong enough, fast enough, smart enough." Tovan's tail moved in slow, pained patterns. "When I emerged, I knew logically that none of it was real, but the emotional truth remained. I still carry that guilt, even knowing it's manufactured. That's what level 9 does. It creates wounds that never fully heal." "I'm already carrying wounds," Dae-sung said quietly. "One more won't make the difference." "You're wrong," Tovan replied. "The wounds you carry now you chose to carry. You integrated them into who you are, used them to motivate yourself. Level 9 doesn't give you that choice. It forces trauma into you like poison." Dae-sung looked at both of them. "My brother died in level 6. Before he entered the Crucible, he sent me a message. Just 3 words. Find their limits. He wanted me to see how far these tests really went, to prove that limits are just numbers someone made up. I can't stop at level 8, I need to see what he saw in level 9. Your brother never reached level 9, Hana said gently. I know, but somewhere in this facility, the Crucible recorded how he died, what he faced, what broke him. I need to understand that. Hana's forearms moved in a gesture of resignation. Very well, but understand this. After level 9, you have the right to refuse level 10. In fact, I'll be recommending that you do. Level 10 has never been survived. It was designed as an execution method during the ancient wars. No one completes level 10. Why does it exist if no one can survive it? Dae-sung asked. Because the beings who designed the Crucible believed there should be an absolute ceiling, a reminder that some limits cannot be exceeded. 3 days later, Dae-sung stood before the entrance to level 9. The door looked different from the others. Instead of a large chamber entrance, it was a simple portal leading to a small room, containing a single chair and a neural interface helmet. The observation deck was packed. Word had spread that the human was attempting level 9. Warriors, administrators, even coalition officials had come to witness this moment. Dae-sung received one final message from Earth before entering. Ji-won's transmission had been sent a week ago, but the distance meant it arrived now. Her voice was steady but emotional. Dae-sung, everyone here is proud of you. You've already done the impossible. But I need you to understand something. Your brother wouldn't want you to destroy yourself trying to finish his journey. He'd want you to live. Please remember that, whatever you face in there. Remember that someone on Earth wants you to come home. Dae-sung saved the message, then stepped into level 9. The room was small and sterile. He sat in the chair and placed the neural interface helmet on his head. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. He felt the simulation linked directly to his consciousness, bypassing all the normal filters and defenses his mind used to process reality. The world dissolved. He was standing in level 6 again, watching from a distance as his brother Tae-hyun entered the chamber. The simulation was perfect, every detail exact. Dae-sung tried to move to call out, but he was frozen, forced to simply watch. Tae-hyun moved through the jungle environment with confidence. He was strong, skilled, everything a warrior should be. Then the predators came, not one at a time as they should have. The simulation showed them attacking together, coordinated in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Dae-sung watched his brother fight. Watched him get injured. Watched him realize he couldn't win. And then, worst of all, he heard his brother's voice. Dae-sung, help me, please, where are you? The simulation made him believe it was real. Made him feel like he was actually there, actually hearing his brother's final words. The guilt crashed over him like a physical weight. Then the scenario reset. He watched it again, and again, each time from a different angle. Each time with his brother's voice calling for help that never came. The simulation found every variation of the memory that could cause pain and forced him to experience them all. In the observation deck, Hana monitored the neural interface readings. His stress levels are catastrophic, she said to Tovan. He's been in there for 45 minutes. Most beings break by now. He's stubborn, Tovan replied, like his species. But stubbornness alone won't be enough. Inside the simulation, Dae-sung had lost count of how many times he'd watched his brother die. The scenarios had started to blur together. His mind was being crushed under the weight of manufactured guilt. But then something shifted. Between one replay and the next, Dae-sung found a moment of clarity. The simulation was trying to break him by making him feel responsible. It was weaponizing his guilt. But guilt implied he could have changed the outcome. It implied he'd had a choice and made the wrong one. Dae-sung hadn't been at the Crucible when his brother died. He'd been on Earth serving his own military contract. He couldn't have helped Tae-hyun because he hadn't known his brother was here. The simulation was lying, not about the events, but about the responsibility. When the next replay started, Dae-sung did something the simulation didn't expect. He spoke to it. I couldn't have saved him, he said into the void of the simulation. And that's not the same as being responsible for his death. The simulation paused. The scenario flickered. You're trying to make me break by loading me with guilt I don't deserve, Dae-sung continued. But I already carry the guilt I do deserve. I wasn't there for my brother when he needed family support before he came here. I didn't tell him I loved him often enough. I let years pass with minimal contact because I was focused on my own career. The simulation shifted, trying to show him those failures instead. Yes, Dae-sung said. Show me those. Those are real. Those are mine. I carry that weight every day. I accept it. It's part of who I am now. The simulation didn't know how to respond to acceptance. It was designed to exploit denial, fear, and avoidance. It could force someone to confront their trauma, but it couldn't handle someone who'd already confronted it and integrated it into their identity. Dae-sung sat in the void of the simulation, surrounded by images of his brother, and he spoke to them as if speaking to Tae-hyun himself. I miss you. I wish I'd been a better brother. I wish you hadn't died here, but I can't change any of that. All I can do is finish what you started and prove that these limits they've set are just numbers on a wall. You wanted me to find their limits. I'm going to find them. The simulation tried one final assault. It showed him his worst fear, a future where he died in the Crucible like his brother, where both brothers became nothing more than statistics, where their lives meant nothing. That might happen, Dae-sung said calmly. Death is always possible, but meaninglessness? That's something I choose, and I choose to make this mean something. The simulation collapsed. The neural interface disconnected. Dae-sung opened his eyes in the small room, tears streaming down his face, his body shaking with emotion. But he was conscious. He was intact. He'd survived level 9. The observation deck erupted in shock. The neural interface had recorded 6 hours and 32 minutes. Dae-sung had beaten Tovan's record and emerged victorious from a level designed to break the human psyche. When Dae-sung stumbled out of the chamber, medical drones surrounded him, but he waved them away. He walked straight to the observation window and looked up at the crowd of alien faces staring down at him. "Level 10, he said simply. "I'm ready for level 10. Hana's voice came through the communication system, and for the first time it carried genuine fear. "No, I forbid it. Level 10 is an execution chamber. It was never meant to be survived." "Then why does it exist?" Dae-sung asked. The question hung in the air. Finally, Hana descended to speak with him directly. "I need to tell you the truth about level 10, she said. Hana took Dae-sung to a private conference room, away from the crowds and observation decks. Tovan joined them, his massive frame barely fitting through the doorway. The room's walls were lined with historical displays showing the Crucible's development over thousands of years. Level 10 was created during the Unification Wars, Hana began. Her forearms moving in patterns that Dae-sung had learned meant deep concern. 8,000 years ago, the galaxy was divided into hundreds of warring factions. The species that built the Crucible, the architects, believed in absolute order and perfection. They created Level 10 as a method of execution for war criminals and those they deemed irredeemable. She activated a holographic display showing technical specifications. Level 10 combines every test from levels 1 through 9 simultaneously. Physical challenges, mental puzzles, psychological warfare all happening at once. But that's not what makes it impossible. The chamber uses advanced AI to analyze the warrior in real time, constantly adapting to counter every strategy, every strength, every instinct. "So it learns as you fight?" Dae-sung asked. "Worse, it predicts. The architects built it using quantum probability engines. It calculates millions of possible futures simultaneously and adjusts to close off every path to victory. If you try to use strength, it becomes stronger. If you try intelligence, it becomes smarter. If you try to endure, it extends indefinitely. There is no winning strategy because it eliminates strategy itself." Tovan's tail moved in slow, heavy patterns. "I researched level 10 after I failed level 9. I wanted to understand what lay beyond my limit. The records show that 173 beings have attempted level 10 in the Crucible's history. All died, most within the first hour. The longest survival time was 3 hours and 42 minutes, achieved by one of the architects themselves testing their own creation. Even they couldn't survive it." Dae-sung absorbed this information silently. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him. If it's just an execution chamber, why leave it active? Why not deactivate it after the wars ended? Hana's golden eyes met his. Because the Coalition wanted a reminder. A symbol that some limits are absolute, that perfection exists and cannot be exceeded. Level 10 represents the ceiling of possibility. It tells every species in the galaxy, this far and no further. "That's stupid," Dae-sung said bluntly. Both Hana and Tovan stared at him. "It's stupid," he repeated. "Limits aren't real. They're just lines we draw, because we're scared of what's beyond them. My brother understood that. That's why he came here, not to prove he was strong, but to prove that these tests are just tests. They're not truth. They're not fate. They're just challenges someone made up." "Your brother died in level 6, Hana said gently. "I know, but he got further than anyone expected." He moved the line. "Now I'm going to move it again. You'll die," Tovan said simply. "I respect your courage, human. But courage alone cannot defeat quantum probability engines designed by a species far more advanced than yours." "Maybe not," Dae-sung agreed. "But I won't know until I try." The Coalition High Command convened an emergency session. News that a human was requesting entry to level 10 had spread throughout the galaxy. Some officials argued for denying the request. Level 10 deaths were considered shameful for the Crucible's reputation. Others argued that denying access would be worse, suggesting the Coalition feared a human might actually survive. After 3 hours of debate, they reached a decision. Dae-sung would be allowed to attempt level 10, but he would have to sign documents accepting full responsibility. The coalition would not be held liable for his death. They would return his body to Earth with honors, but nothing more. Dae-sung signed without reading the documents. On Earth, Ji-won watched the news feeds with millions of other humans. The delay in communication meant that by the time she was watching Dae-sung prepare for level 10, the attempt would already be over, one way or another. She recorded a message anyway, knowing he'd never receive it in time, but needing to say it. "I understand why you're doing this," she said to the camera. "Your brother wanted you to find their limits. But Dae-sung, the real limit isn't in that chamber. The real limit is in our minds and our willingness to accept what we're told is impossible. You've already proven that humans can exceed expectations. You don't have to die to prove it further. Please come home." The message would take days to reach the Crucible. By then, everything would be decided. The day of the attempt arrived. The observation deck was filled beyond capacity. Coalition officials, warriors from dozens of species, and media representatives from across the galaxy crowded every available space. This was history one way or another. Either they would witness the first being to survive level 10, or they would watch another warrior die in humanity's name. Dae-sung stood before the entrance to level 10. The door was massive, constructed from materials that could withstand any known weapon. Warning symbols in 100 languages covered its surface. The message was clear: beyond this point lies death. Hana approached him one final time. "I have to ask again. Please don't do this. You've proven yourself beyond any doubt. You've brought honor to your species and your brother's memory. This doesn't need to happen." "Yes, it does," Dae-sung replied. "Because if I walk away now, every being in the galaxy will look at level 10 and think, that's the limit. That's where possibility ends. I need them to see someone try. Even if I fail, I need them to see someone refuse to accept the limit." Tovin placed one massive clawed hand on Dae-sung's shoulder. "Your species is strange, human. You face impossible odds with nothing but stubbornness and strange thinking. But I am honored to have known you. You've taught me that limits are not always where we think they are." The doors to level 10 opened. The chamber beyond was enormous, easily 5 kilometers across. The environment was chaos. Dae-sung could see multiple terrain types simultaneously: desert, Arctic, jungle, urban ruins. The sky cycled through different colors as atmospheric conditions changed in real time. Automated weapons tracked movement from hundreds of positions. Holographic interfaces floated in the air, displaying puzzles that needed solving. And underneath it all, he could feel the neural interface trying to connect to his mind. Everything at once. Every test. Every challenge. All happening simultaneously. Dae-sung took a deep breath and stepped inside. The assault was immediate and overwhelming. Gravity shifted, throwing him off balance. Temperature spiked to scorching heat. Automated weapons opened fire. The neural interface pushed images of his brother into his mind. Puzzles appeared, demanding solutions. Predator simulations materialized in the distance. Moving toward him, in the observation deck, monitoring stations showed Dae-sung's vital signs spiking to dangerous levels within the first 30 seconds. "He's going to die in the first 10 minutes, a coalition official said grimly. But Dae-sung didn't die. He did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Standing in the middle of impossible chaos, injured and overwhelmed, Dae-sung started laughing. Not the laugh of someone who'd gone mad, but the laugh of someone who just understood a joke that no one else got. The Crucible was using galactic logic. It was designed by beings who believed in perfection, who approached problems with systematic thinking. Every species that had attempted level 10 had used their strengths: raw power, advanced intelligence, technological superiority, specialized evolution. But humans didn't specialize. Humans were generalists. Humans were chaos. The Crucible was trying to predict his moves using logical frameworks. But Dae-sung wasn't going to be logical. He started by doing something completely random. Instead of seeking shelter from the weapon's fire, he ran toward it. Instead of solving the puzzles, he destroyed them. Instead of fighting the predators, he ignored them completely and climbed a structure that had no strategic value. The Crucible's AI tried to adapt, but adaptation required understanding the strategy being employed. Dae-sung wasn't employing strategy. He was deliberately being unpredictable. When the environment shifted to extreme cold, he took off his jacket. When gravity increased, he started jumping instead of walking carefully. When the neural interface tried to show him painful memories, he started singing an old Earth song his brother had taught him. He wasn't trying to survive efficiently. He was trying to confuse the system. Hours passed. Dae-sung was injured, exhausted, and bleeding from multiple wounds. But he was still alive. The Crucible's AI was consuming enormous processing power trying to predict his next move, and it kept failing. In the observation deck, technicians were studying the readings with disbelief. The quantum probability engines are overheating, one reported. They're calculating millions of possible futures, but none of them match what he's actually doing. That's impossible, Hana said. The engines were designed by the architects. They can predict any rational behavior. That's the problem, Tovin said quietly, his eyes glowing with something like pride. He's not being rational. Dae-sung had realized something crucial. The architects who built this chamber believed in perfect order. They couldn't comprehend true chaos because their entire civilization was built on eliminating it. They'd created a test that could counter any logical response. But humans had evolved in chaos. Earth was a chaotic world with unpredictable weather, random natural disasters, and no clear evolutionary path. Humans survived by being adaptable, unpredictable, and willing to try things that made no logical sense. Dae-sung weaponized his own blood, using it to blind sensors. He rested in the middle of combat scenarios, confusing the targeting systems. He solved puzzles incorrectly on purpose, creating errors in the simulation. He talked to the automated weapons, treating them like conversation partners. Every action was designed to be unpredictable. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to make the concept of winning meaningless. At hour 6, Dae-sung reached what should have been the final challenge. The chamber generated a perfect simulation of himself, just as level 9 had done with mental scenarios. This was the ultimate test: defeat yourself. The simulation version of Dae-sung was faster, stronger, and undamaged. It knew every technique he knew, every strategy he might employ. Dae-sung looked at his perfect copy and smiled. "I've been fighting myself my whole life," he said. "Guilt, fear, doubt, anger. You're just another voice in my head telling me I can't do something." The copy attacked. It was skilled, precise, everything Dae-sung should have been. But Dae-sung didn't fight like himself. He fought like someone who'd already accepted defeat. He took hits he could have blocked. He made mistakes deliberately. He lost ground constantly. The copy was confused. It was programmed to counter rational combat. But Dae-sung was fighting like someone who didn't care about winning, only about staying alive long enough to be annoying. Finally, after a brutal exchange, Dae-sung found an opening. Not through skill, but through pure luck and the fact that his copy was trying to predict his moves. He landed a single strike that disabled the simulation. The chamber fell silent. Every test had been completed or rendered meaningless through sheer chaos. Dae-sung stood in the center of the chamber, barely able to stand, covered in blood and injuries. Medical alerts were screaming on every monitor in the observation deck, but he was alive. He'd survived level 10. And then in the silence of that impossible moment, Dae-sung asked the question that would echo across the galaxy. Is there an 11? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. In the observation deck, absolute silence had fallen. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy stared at the monitors showing Dae-sung standing in the center of level 10, bloodied but alive, asking the impossible question, is there an 11? The Coalition High Command members looked at each other with expressions ranging from shock to confusion. There was no level 11. The Crucible had 10 levels. It had always had 10 levels. The question didn't make sense, except it made perfect sense. Hana understood first. Her forearms trembled slightly as the realization hit her. He's not asking if there's another physical level, she said quietly to the officials around her. He's asking why we stopped at 10. He's asking who decided that 10 was the limit. One official, a tall being from a species known for logical thinking, activated his communication device. There is no level 11. The Crucible has 10 levels. You have completed them. You have achieved the impossible. Exit the chamber immediately for medical treatment. Through the monitors, they watched Dae-sung shake his head. I understand there's no physical level 11. But that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking why you built a level 10 that was designed to kill, then stopped. If the goal was to create an absolute limit, why not keep going? Why not level 12? Level 20? Level 100? The question exposed something the Coalition had never examined. The architects had built the crucible with 10 levels because that was their tradition. 10 was a significant number in their culture, but there was no logical reason for stopping at 10. It was arbitrary. "Evacuate the chamber," the official repeated, his voice uncertain now. "This is not a philosophical discussion. You require immediate medical attention." But Dae-sung remained standing in the center of the chamber. "I'll leave when I'm ready. Right now I'm examining something interesting." He began walking through the chamber, studying the walls, the automated systems, the interfaces. The monitoring stations showed his vital signs were critical. He should have collapsed by now. But stubbornness apparently could override physical limitations. Dae-sung found what he was looking for, a maintenance access panel. The chamber had been designed by the architects but maintained by coalition workers. And maintenance required access to the inner workings. "What is he doing?" an official demanded. Hana pulled up technical schematics. "He's accessing the maintenance corridors. Those passages run throughout the facility's infrastructure. They're not part of the testing environment. Stop him." "How? Level 10 is sealed during operation. We can't enter until he exits or dies." Those are the safety protocols. Through the maintenance access, Dae-sung entered a world of tunnels and passages that existed behind the crucible's public face. Here the technology was visible in its raw form. Power conduits, data streams, the quantum engines that process the chamber's adaptive responses. It was like looking behind the curtain of a theatrical production. He began broadcasting through his communication device, speaking to everyone watching. "The crucible is impressive. The technology is beyond anything Earth can create. But you know what I'm seeing in these maintenance corridors? The same thing I see in every complex system. It's finite. It has boundaries. Not because those boundaries are natural or necessary, but because someone decided to stop building." His words were being transmitted throughout the galaxy. On Earth, billions watched their representatives speak from inside the legendary crucible. On dozens of other worlds, beings that had accepted the crucible's limits as absolute truth began to question. Level 10 was designed to be impossible, Dae-sung continued, leaning against a wall as exhaustion caught up with him. The architects who built it believed they'd created perfection, a test that could defeat any being through pure adaptive superiority. But they made a mistake. They assumed perfection meant having an answer to everything. They didn't understand that chaos doesn't need answers. It just needs to keep moving. Coalition officials were arguing frantically. Some demanded they cut power to the facility and extract him by force. Others argued that would violate the Crucible's ancient protocols. Still others simply wanted to understand what the human was trying to prove. Ji-won's message, sent days earlier, finally reached Dae-sung's communication device. He played it in the maintenance corridor, her voice echoing in the metal space. Her words about coming home, about how he'd already proven enough, about how his brother wouldn't want him to destroy himself. Dae-sung smiled sadly. "I'm sorry, Ji-won, I need to finish this. Not for my brother. Not even for humanity. For everyone who's ever been told they've reached their limit." He pushed himself away from the wall and continued exploring the facility's infrastructure. What he found confirmed his suspicions. The Crucible was sophisticated, but it was still just technology. Impressive technology, yes, but technology built by beings who believed limits were real. "I'm going to tell you all something," Dae-sung said, his voice tired but steady. "I didn't survive level 10 because I'm special. I'm not stronger than the warriors who died here. I'm not smarter than the beings who built this place. I survived because I refused to play by the rules the Crucible expected." He found a central hub where data streams converged, showing the processing load of the quantum engines. The displays showed massive computational strain. The system had been pushed beyond its design specifications, trying to predict his chaos. The architects built level 10 to prove that perfection exists, that there's an absolute ceiling to what's possible, but perfection is a lie. There is no ceiling. There are only the limits we accept. When I asked, "Is there an 11?" I wasn't asking for another chamber to fight through. I was asking why we accept the limits that others set for us. In the observation deck, Tovin's tail moved in patterns of deep respect. He's not trying to beat the Crucible anymore. He's trying to change what the Crucible means. Hana nodded slowly. He's deconstructing 8,000 years of tradition with logic that a child could understand. And we have no answer for it. Dae-sung's vital signs had stabilized somewhat. The brief rest in the maintenance corridors, away from the chamber's active challenges, had allowed his body to begin recovery. He made his way back toward the main chamber, but not through the maintenance access. He'd found something else. The facility's original construction blueprints, stored in the data systems. "I want to show you something," he said, projecting the blueprints onto a holographic display that he'd activated. "These are the original plans for the Crucible. Look at this section here. The architects left space for expansion. They built the facility with the capacity for 15 levels, not 10. They stopped at 10 not because they reached a technological limit, but because they chose to stop." The revelation rippled through the observation deck. Officials pulled up the ancient records confirming what Daesung had found. The Crucible had always been designed with room for expansion. The limit of 10 levels wasn't architectural. It was philosophical. They stopped at 10 because their culture valued that number, Daesung continued. They created a limit based on tradition, not possibility. And for 8,000 years, every species in the galaxy has accepted that limit as truth. Even knowing warriors die in level 10, you all kept treating it as the absolute ceiling. No one questioned why. He emerged back into the main chamber through a different access point, and the automated systems immediately began targeting him again. But the quantum engines were still overheated from his previous session. Their responses were slower, less adaptive. The perfect system had been damaged by encountering something it couldn't predict. Daesung walked calmly through the weapons fire, taking cover when necessary, moving with purpose toward the exit. "I'm leaving now. Not because I've failed and not because I've succeeded. I'm leaving because the test is over. Not when the Crucible says it's over. When I say it's over." The exit door was locked. Protocol required the chamber to determine when a warrior had completed or failed the level. But Daesung had learned the system through his time in the maintenance corridors. He accessed an emergency override panel, one designed for facility workers to evacuate in case of malfunction. The door opened. Daesung stepped through. Medical drones immediately swarmed him, but he waved them away long enough to look up at the observation deck. "Level 10 is complete," he said clearly. "Not because I beat it through strength or intelligence, but because I refused to let it define when I was finished. Now about level 11. Coalition officials began protesting, but Daesung raised his hand. "I don't want you to build a level 11. I want you to understand that the question itself is the point. Asking what's next is more important than completing what's in front of you. My brother died in level 6, but before he died, he understood something. These tests don't define our limits. We define our limits." Hana descended from the observation deck, Tovan following. They approached Daesung as medical drones worked to stabilize his injuries. The human looked terrible. Blood loss, exhaustion, multiple fractures, and severe neural strain. But he was alive, conscious, and somehow still standing. "What you've done today," Hana said quietly, "will change everything. The Crucible has existed for 8,000 years as a symbol of absolute limits. You've just proven that symbol is false." "Not false," Daesung corrected. "Just incomplete. The Crucible is still valuable. It tests capability, reveals potential, pushes beings beyond what they thought possible, but it should never have been treated as the final word on what's achievable." Tavan's massive hand rested gently on Daesung's shoulder. "You asked me once what I found beyond level 9. I told you it nearly destroyed me. Now I'll ask you, what did you find beyond level 10? Daesung's eyes were tired but clear. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's the most important discovery of all. There's nothing beyond level 10 except what we choose to build. The real level 11 isn't a chamber or a test. It's deciding what to do when there are no more levels left to climb." The Coalition High Command convened again, this time to address the philosophical crisis one human had created. After hours of debate, they reached a decision. The Crucible would remain operational, but with significant changes. Level 10 would be redesigned. Not to be easier, but to be survivable through multiple strategies, not just chaos. And they would add one more level. Level 11 would be simple. After completing level 10, a warrior would enter a plane room with a single exit. No challenges, no enemies, no puzzles, just a door leading out. The test would be simple, walk away. Know when the testing is over and choose your own path forward. The first warrior to complete the new level 11 was Daesung himself 3 days later, after medical treatment had stabilized him. He entered the plane room, looked around at the emptiness, smiled, and walked out the exit. The entire action took 12 seconds. News of Daesung's achievement spread throughout the galaxy. The human who survived level 10 and asked the question no one else thought to ask. His legacy wasn't the survival itself, though that was impressive. His legacy was changing how an entire galaxy thought about limits. Offers flooded in. Command positions, teaching roles, endorsements from weapons manufacturers, and research positions from scientific institutions. Daesung declined them all. When Hana asked what he planned to do, he gave a simple answer. I'm going home. I have someone there who asked me to come back. Then I'm going to find other impossible things. Not to prove I can beat them, but to prove they're not as impossible as everyone thinks. Toven walked with Daesung to his ship, purchased with the prize money the Coalition had awarded for completing level 10. The Draknir warrior moved slowly, his ancient body showing the weight of years and battles. Will you attempt the Crucible again? Tovan asked. Now that level 11 exists? No, Daesung replied. I'm done with tests. I proved what I needed to prove. Now it's time to actually live, not just survive challenges others set for me. Wise, your brother would be proud. Daesung stopped at the entrance to his ship and looked back at the Crucible facility. My brother came here to find limits and prove they could be exceeded. I came here to finish his journey. But I learned something he didn't live long enough to discover. The real victory isn't exceeding limits. It's understanding that limits are just suggestions. You can acknowledge them, respect them, or ignore them completely. The choice is always yours. On Earth, Jiwon watched the news feeds showing Daesung's ship departing the Crucible facility. The delay meant she was watching something that had happened days ago, but she didn't care. She started recording a message, knowing this time he'd receive it within reasonable time. Welcome home, she said simply. We have a lot to talk about. 3 months later, Daesung stood in a coalition assembly hall addressing representatives from 100 worlds. They'd asked him to speak about his experience, to share what he'd learned. He kept it brief. Everyone wants to know how I survived level 10. They want the technique, the strategy, the secret. But there is no secret. I survived because I refused to accept that survival was impossible. That's not special. Every being in this galaxy has that same capability. You've just been taught not to use it. He paused, looking across the assembled representatives. The Crucible taught the galaxy that there are absolute limits, that some things cannot be exceeded. I didn't disprove that. I just proved that those limits are further away than you think, and they move when you push them. So stop accepting the limits others give you. Find your own limits, then push those too. And when someone tells you that you've reached the absolute ceiling of what's possible, ask them one simple question. Daesung smiled. Ask them, is there an 11? The galaxy remembered those words. Other humans began attempting the Crucible, not to prove humanity's superiority, but to test their own limits. Other species returned to the facility with new perspectives. Warriors who'd failed before tried again with different approaches. The Crucible's completion rates increased, not because the test became easier, but because warriors stopped treating the levels as absolute judgments of their worth. They became what they should have always been. Challenges to overcome, not definitions of identity. Years later, an Earth historian would write about Daesung's achievement. The final line of the historical account would read, "He didn't change what was possible. He changed what we believed was possible, and in the end that made all the difference." Daesung never attempted the Crucible again. He didn't need to. He'd found what he came for, proof that his brother's death meant something, proof that asking questions was more powerful than accepting answers, proof that the only real limit is the one you choose to accept. And somewhere in whatever place exists beyond life, Taehyun smiled.